It causes a great deal of inconvenience. You've got to, go to your bank, cancel your card, reorder a card. You've got 20 automatic payments that come out of your credit card, so you've got to go and tell those 20 people to take it out of a different card from that point. Now the thing is, once again, we never see a customer that's out of pocket here for this type of thing. It's either the poor retailer or the bank that ends up copping the cost of this type of fraud, depending on how the transactions are originally conducted. But I guess as consumers, ultimately, right across society, those costs are passed on, and it's built into the way that, the demand for the electronic banking and the way that we have gone, and the convenience, has outweighed by far any of the costs of this sort of stuff happening. So that's sort of why we've got to where we are. But what it's also meant is that banks have also invested in technology, such software that can detect a lot of this stuff. So a lot of people have also had phone calls to say either, one or two things. Did you just buy something off the US iTunes store, or did you just buy something off US eBay? Yes, I did. You get that type of phone call. Also, things such as software security Falcon with credit cards. As soon as a transaction's done in a certain place, 50% of what those people call up about actually does turn out to be fraudulent. So it's very effective in picking it up. There's also another one called Hawkeye, which is to do with more just your transactional type of stuff. As Paul said before, with your tap and go, now this created a lot. I know a lot of people that I knew said they couldn't, because the technology came in before people were aware of what it actually was, and none of us asked for it or knew about it when it came in, and some people weren't comfortable with it at all. They thought somebody can just go up and just tap the card. I drop the card on the floor, they can go to a $20 transaction somewhere. As Paul said, that type of stuff accounts for 0.03% of the total dollar fraud or what have you. So it's really not an issue in the big scheme of things. But once again, it was the pace at which things happened. Even those of us that work in the bank, a lot of this went past us. A lot of retailers are still catching up to it as well. So the uncertainty of going in somewhere and not knowing if they actually do it or not once you actually enjoy the thing. So I spoke about the demand for these things, and the competitive element would say that, if you don't embrace or have this as a financial institution or as a retailer or what have you, you're going to be behind the eight ball. And we've seen, companies that don't embrace the technology, whether it be social media or whether it be the type of devices such as mobile phones, they've been overtaken by the bigger companies that have actually invested in the technology. And that's something on the slide earlier, we probably showed the huge investment that the bank has put into this, and the ka-ching and certain things that people ultimately are probably going to be demanding. Just in relation to credit card fraud and purchasing, and I spoke about insurance, when you make a purchase online, some of you may not be aware, but when you purchase something online, maybe using your credit card, a lot of times those goods, before they get to you, are actually covered by insurance that's provided through your credit card. And if you were doing it through, say, eBay, PayPal covers those transactions as well. So even if the person you're buying the goods off is fraudulent, and I've had this happen myself, PayPal will give the money back to you and charge it back to where it's come, where the money did go. So certainly a much greater level of security in some ways than cash did afford us before. You go to buy some goods off somebody, you give them the money and they shoot through. You're certainly not going to get your money back there, and that's probably been lost on us a little bit with some of the hype around the electronic banking and e-crime. I spoke about the bank's investment. Most major banks in Australia provide free software to clients. So Norton or McAfee, something like that, which they would do that to encourage the use of, but also to ensure that people can safely use this electronic banking technology. Paul spoke about if he was transferring money to me for the first time, so that's been a massive improvement also in what we saw in the early days, which was people who could get a hold of some details and actually transfer money to their account somewhere. That's now a very difficult process, and as you make it more and more difficult, I had to physically steal Paul's phone Otherwise, I actually had no chance. If someone is, a lot of these crooks are not actually beside you; they're far away. There's no way that they're going to be able to do that type of perpetrate that type of thing. It's very disruptive for the fraud. They'll move on to something that's a lot easier. And I spoke about the fact that we don't get robbed at the bank anymore. It's just not a profitable exercise. It's not actually reward for risk, and that's why crime has flourished a little bit to some extent. Just an example of what CBA officially, details out for a customer, and this would probably be very similar to most major banks in Australia. The key security measures that the bank provides, and I guess this is particularly around internet banking, is first of all there's data encryption. So any communications from your computer to the secure systems that the bank has, the data is encrypted, so it ensures there's confidentiality of the data sent and received. Data encryption, the easiest way to explain that is that the data that you might see is more or less scrambled or not something that you can digest unless you have a password to actually access it. So I'm not technical enough to know, what 256-bit encryption is compared to something else, but I do know that in its basic form that's what it does. So that's within the bank systems. There's digital certificates which are used to identify the authenticity of websites. You can view a digital certificate. There's a padlock icon that you might have seen on a screen, and probably like me, you've never clicked on it. That's what it is. There's dedicated staff, so net banking and all the systems are constantly reviewed, and we've got the software that I mentioned around credit cards. Also, our net banking security area work closely with the High-Tech Crime Centre and the Federal Police. So a lot of times, as I said before, they know what's happening before it actually is going to happen. They know what's actually they're dealing with. It's just a matter of sort of trying to combat it and reduce mitigate the losses or risks of what's happening with it, and try and shut it down as quickly as they can, which generally happens, and then something pops up again another 6 months later is what we've seen. We have independent audits, so IT specialists and consultants will come in, and I guess they'll try and hack the out of the system, see if they can do what they want to do, and make sure the integrity is there. And as far as I know, or at least within Commonwealth and also within Suncorp from my days there, I know that the system itself was never breached. I spoke just briefly on those phishing scams.